Hello and welcome. Today we're going to take a tour through 200 years of sewing boxes, featuring some of the boxes and cases from my own collection. Some of them were passed down through my family, some I bought at auction or from antique dealers. And in the interests of complete transparency, we'll begin with my own box from 2025. When I reach for my favourite scissors or thimble or any of my other everyday sewing tools, this is the box that I keep them all in. Unromantic as a plastic toolbox is, it holds everything I need to make a garment. And that, in essence, is the purpose of a sewing box, whatever its outer shape. That outer shape in its turn can reflect the taste and fashion of the era in which it was made and used. My toolbox, unlike the earlier examples we'll see later, isn't meant for public display, and it suits the practicality I demand of it. Tough, spacious, inexpensive, and easily carried from room to room. By contrast, my mum's sewing box is a small piece of furniture that stood in the corner of my parents' living room throughout my childhood. It keeps all the elements of practicality, but it also demonstrates the home furnishing trends of the mid-20th century. It's a derivation of the Scandinavian sewing boxes fashionable in the 1950s and 60s. These were often made of woods such as birch or teak and featured bent wood carrying handles, cantilevered or cleverly folded out drawers, and slim angled legs. The trend then was for furniture with a pared down and minimal look that dispensed with the fussy details of the past. This style of sewing box is still manufactured and deservedly popular to this day. By folding out the drawers, you can see that they still contain some of my mum's sewing tools and materials from the 1970s. My grandmother was born in the 1880s, and her sewing box choices reflected the age in which she was born and grew up. The piece I own that belonged to her isn't exactly a box, but a case. These sewing compacts or compendiums were a frequent gift to women in the Victorian and Edwardian period, and so they survive in considerable numbers. They often lack some of their tools, notably the thimble, and are incomplete, but they do give a good picture of the sewing habits and occupations of their owners. This one probably dates between 1900 and 1910. It opens with a stud catch. It's covered in red leather with gilded decoration and lined in bright crimson silk satin and matching silk velvet. It shows the usual array of fitments: holders for packets of sewing needles, some of them still full, bodkins, a space for a thimble, but this one isn't just confined to sewing. There are also sets of metal knitting needles and even a small button hook. The tools are mismatched. Some of the handles are made from mother of pearl, others are, I suspect, early plastics, but I haven't made any attempt to reorder them or weed them out, since this is the way my grandmother kept them and used them. Another sewing compendium that I own has a complete set of tools but shows much less signs of use. I would place this one tentatively in the 1870s, but it could be slightly older. The case is a small one and is covered in shagreen, the skin of the shark or ray, which was a very popular covering for jewellery boxes and small cases of all kinds in the 18th and 19th centuries. It was also, incidentally, used for the covering of sword scabbards and for their hilts, as the rough pebbled finish improved grip and repelled moisture. The case is lined in pea green silk satin and a matching silk plush, a long pile velvet, intended to cushion the case's contents and hold them in place. The colour has faded over time. By looking underneath the tools, it can be seen how vivid and handsome a shade the fabrics originally were. The tools are made of bone and metal and include packets of needles, 2 sewing awls, an engraved metal bodkin, a needle case, and a crochet hook. The smaller awl doesn't appear to exactly match the other tools and could be a replacement. Other sets of a similar configuration have a small pair of scissors that would fit with their points inside the thimble. However, the awl fits well into its fabric loop, so this really is anyone's guess. We leap backwards in time to 1830 with our next box. It came to me in a bit of a sorry state, very dark with grime and missing its tiny bun feet. The seller also informed me that he thought it had contained someone's cremation ashes, partly due to the sarcophagus shape of the box and mostly due to the small brass plaque on the lid which reads Maria Cleveland, August 1830. Let's tackle that one right away. The first official and registered cremation didn't take place in England until 1885, and the classical sarcophagus form was popular throughout the Regency and on into the Victorian era for jewellery containers, tea caddies and sewing boxes. Why then might it have a named and dated plaque on the lid? A sewing box was often bestowed on a young girl as a school or Sunday school prize at this time. Sewing was a useful and indeed a universal skill and accomplishment for women in 1830, approved of by all as it encouraged neatness, patience and industry. This box was most likely just such a prize, and the date of August 1830 would have been when Maria Cleveland was awarded it or received it. I took the box to a furniture restorer and he made and fitted replacement bun feet for it. The holes for their tiny pegs were still evident at each corner. It equally well might have had small brass feet in the shape of a lion's paw, as these were very popular too. With a thorough and careful clean using the products the restorer recommended, the box is as you see it today, a handsome and glossy little example in rosewood. Rosewood, disappointingly, isn't obtained from the rose plant. It's an exotic hardwood, prized for its beautiful rich colour, and is named for the sweet smell it gives off when the wood is cut, a scent reminiscent of roses. Opening the box up, all the fitments it may once have had are gone. There could have been a tray to hold sewing tools, held in place by the slope of the sides, with a space beneath. The inside of the box retains a paper lining and the bright pink paint which was a common pigment used for early 19th century sewing boxes. It has its original lock and key. I've arranged with it the kind of tools it might once have contained. Needles, a bone bodkin used for threading tapes and ribbons through casings or eyelets, a tiny pair of scissors, a wooden reel for thread, and a bone thread winder. The following images show the contents of the most fashionable and desirable sewing boxes of the period. These are Palais Royal boxes, named for the place where they were sold in Paris. Their luxurious silk satin and velvet linings, mirrored and cushioned, hold tools made of precious metals, enamel work, mother of pearl and ivory, and were intended for the wealthiest in society. The contents of these often include a tiny perfume bottle. Unsurprisingly, I don't own one of these gorgeous fairy tale creations. Nowadays, a good example sells for thousands of pounds. Lower down on the social scale, the Workwoman's Guide, the first edition was published in 1838, the second edition in 1840, gives clear advice in Chapter 4 on setting up a sewing box or basket from scratch. A workbox or basket should be large enough to hold a moderate supply of work and all its requisites, without being of such a size as to be inconvenient to carry about or lift with ease. It should contain 6 or 8 of the most useful sized white reel sewing cottons, black cotton, and silks, white, black and coloured, a few useful tapes, buttons of all kinds, an ample needle book, a pin cushion, an emery cushion, a waxen reel for strengthening thread, a stiletto, bodkins, a thimble, A small knife and a yard measure made like a carpenter's foot rule, only with nails instead of inches marked upon it. A nail is an old measurement. The author also advises having several pairs of scissors, ranging from a large pair for cutting out to a pair of buttonhole scissors. I think it would be a mistake to say Workwoman's Guide equals poor and a Rosewood sewing box equals rich. I'd wager that the woman who might put the Rosewood sewing box proudly on display in her front parlour or drawing room might also have a basket like that in the Workwoman's Guide, where the bulk of her plain sewing went on. And in households with less pretensions and more practicality, there was likely to be a pretty broad crossover between the two. The last box we'll be looking at today, and the oldest one in my collection, is this unusual example, dated approximately between 1800 and 1820. Made in a very light wood, perhaps a fruit wood or a satin wood, with darker bandings at the edges. It's in a casket or basket shape, with a domed lid and a square base. It has lost its key, but retains one of the original mother-of-pearl escutcheon plates. The other is sadly missing. There are no holes for feet, so like other boxes of this type, it rested on its base, and there's a tiny drawer at the bottom. This little box is not complete, however. It's lacking its handle. This would have been of bent wood, like the handle of a basket, and would have been secured with 2 metal pins into the holes at the sides that are still present. The inside of the box has no fitments. Any tray it might once have had is gone, though it does have the papered and painted lining with traces of the bright pink pigment common for these boxes. Perhaps the most interesting feature of this box is one not easily detected. By looking carefully at the surface, the traces of applied decoration can be seen. Several Oriental type figures and what appears to be a pagoda at the right hand side, with a willow tree at the left and flowers all around. Chinoiserie or Oriental decorative details were a popular alternative to neoclassical motifs in the 18th and early 19th centuries, and someone in the past chose to add them to this little box. They were removed at some point, perhaps when tastes or fashions changed, but have left their shadows behind for us to see. I hope you've enjoyed looking at these sewing boxes and cases with me today. Please do press the like button and consider subscribing to my channel. It costs nothing and really helps the channel to grow. And ring the bell for notifications of new videos. Until next time, thank you for watching and goodbye.